We begin, as all sacred journeys must. In the still hush beneath the noise, that deep inner sanctum where the psyche whispers truths too old for words, and the soul hums the primordial songs of its forgotten inheritance. It is here, beneath the crust of consciousness, that the human heart stirs from its slumber, called not by logic but by longing, a longing to return to itself, to remember what it was before it was shaped by the hands of others. It is not a cry of rebellion, but a hymn of remembrance. The soul, once colonized by shadows not its own, begins to stir with quiet defiance. Before we begin, take a moment to like and subscribe. The more you engage and stay with the content, the more YouTube shares these timeless insights with others. By doing so, you're not only helping this channel grow, but also spreading Carl Jung's transformative wisdom to those seeking meaning and inner truth. Let's dive into the depth of the psyche together. To say no, in this interior language, is not to turn away in cruelty, but to turn inward in love. The psyche speaks in symbols, in roots and rivers, in doors and serpents and ancient fire. And it says this, that a boundary is not a fortress but a womb, a sacred edge, not to keep others out, but to keep the self intact. The unbounded soul is like a garden without walls, trampled by the feet of uninvited guests. Its soil stolen for others' harvests, its flowers cut before blooming. And yet, it was never taught that it could close the gate. It mistook violation for intimacy, enmeshment for belonging. It thought to love meant to disappear. But love without selfhood is not love. It is sacrifice on an altar that was never consecrated. And so many of us walk this world like ghosts alive, but only half here. We carry the voices of mothers who feared their own anger, fathers who vanished into silence, cultures that praised compliance as virtue. We learn to smile while crumbling. We learn to stay still when the soul wanted to howl. This is the inheritance of the boundaryless being, a chaos masked as kindness, a storm beneath a gentle face. But the storm always comes. The unconscious, when denied too long, erupts. Dreams shatter the illusion with images too precise to ignore. A house submerged by rising waters, a door that won't lock, strangers occupying your sacred rooms. I remember the woman who came to me, her voice like fog, soft and hesitant. In her dreams, she returned to her childhood home, only to find strangers had moved in, moved things, renamed what was hers. Even in sleep, she apologized. Even in dreams, she was courteous. She had become a vessel for other people's desires, and in doing so, her own had vanished. She feared being seen as selfish, and so she dissolved herself drop by drop, until nothing remained but a smile. But the soul does not forget. The soul remembers who you were before the world told you who to be. And when the forgetting becomes unbearable, it sends the dragon eternal, archetypal. Terrible rises not to destroy you, but to ask, are you ready to become real? In the old myths, the dragon always guards something precious, a golden apple, a jewel, a truth. And that truth is your power, your sovereignty, your sacred no. To draw the line is to enter the myth. You are no longer a bystander in your own life. You become the knight, the priestess, the alchemist. You step into the forest, sword in hand, not to conquer, but to protect. Protection is not resistance, it is reverence. The line you draw around your soul says, I am worthy of wholeness. I am not here to be consumed. In the realm of depth, individuation is not achieved through perfection, but through authentic distinction. To individuate is to stop mimicking, to cease performing the roles you never auditioned for. It is to claim, I am not your echo. I am not your fantasy. I am not here to complete your unlived life. When the soul begins this reclamation, there is often collapse. The old system resists. Those who benefited from your silence may recoil from your voice. The ones who adored your softness may rage when you say enough. This is the crucible of rebirth. This is the psychic initiation, and it cannot be rushed. Like all sacred rites, it requires surrender and solitude. I once dreamed I was standing before a forest, thick with mist and mystery. Behind me, a city buzzed with expectations, schedules, and faces who wanted fragments of me. In front of me, wildness, silence, unknown. The voice in the dream said, "If you enter, you will lose all hope, but if you stay, you will lose yourself." I stepped forward, not because I was brave, but because staying meant death not of the body, but of the soul. Setting a boundary is crossing that threshold. It is leaving the city of shoulds and entering the sacred wilderness of the self. You will not be applauded for this. The path of individuation is often walked alone, but you will begin to feel your own breath again. You will hear the voice that was always yours. You will meet the parts you buried to survive the child, the rebel, the witch, the king, and one by one, they will return to you. This work is not easy. It is sacred. It is a dismantling and a remembering, a descent into the underworld to retrieve your name. And with each no spoken from truth, you write yourself back into your own myth. Do not confuse boundary with banishment. Do not mistake sovereignty for separation. The soul, once claimed, becomes more capable of love, not less. But it is a love rooted in presence, not performance. A love that gives from fullness, not obligation. Only the soul who knows its edges can offer something real. All else is shadow play. You were never meant to be everything to everyone. You are meant to be wholly, wildly, divinely yourself. And in doing so, you give others permission to do the same. So, I invite you now not as a viewer, but as a fellow traveler to make a gesture, a symbolic act of your own emergence. In the language of archetype and number, choose the digit that resonates with the truth that stirred in you during this passage. Let it be a ritual, small but sacred. If you feel the awakening of your inner dragon, the part of you ready to guard what is holy, comment the number 7, the number of inner mastery, the seeker's path, the hermit's lantern. If you feel yourself reclaiming yourself after years of fragmentation, offer the number 1, the number of origin, of standing alone, of the sovereign flame that begins all transformation. If what stirred in you was the pain of past compliance, the ache of having given yourself away too many times, and now the silent rising of your voice, let that be marked with the number 3, the sacred triad of transformation, death, rebirth, and becoming. This is not about metrics. This is invocation, a signal fire to others wandering the same forest, a breath offered back to the soul. And perhaps, in that small gesture, you will feel it the beginning of your return, the mask, the mirror, the prison. The mask is the persona, the face you wear to survive. It is useful, even necessary. But when the mask fuses with the skin, you forget who is underneath. The mirror reflects others' needs, and you mistake them for your own. The prison is a life built on false agreements, false peace, false belonging. Many are living in these prisons. Few realize the door has always been open. And then there is the dream of the house. The house is the psyche. Its rooms are aspects of the self, some explored, some boarded up. When you dream of your house being invaded, it is not merely anxiety. It is the soul weeping. It says, I no longer recognize this as mine. But when you finally set a boundary, the house begins to rebuild. You discover secret rooms filled with light. You remember where you left the keys. You begin to repaint the walls with your own colors. You become a home again. The modern world despises boundaries. It celebrates the open, the fluid, the boundless. But psychologically, this is dangerous. The ego must be strong to navigate the unconscious. You cannot dive into the ocean of the archetypes if your ship has holes. Many spiritual seekers drown because they bypass the ego in the name of transcendence. But transcendence without containment is psychosis. Mysticism without boundaries becomes possession, to God's return, and they are not always friendly. True individuation requires both openness and limits. You must listen to the dreams, feel the feelings, follow the symbols, but you must also know when to say, "This is mine, that is yours." The healer who does not have boundaries will become the wound. The lover who cannot say no will become the addict. The teacher who cannot hold their center will become the guru who manipulates. Do not mistake enmeshment for intimacy. Do not mistake martyrdom for love. There is a moment in the alchemical journey when the soul, having dissolved the false self, begins to coagulate a new form. Solvit et coagula, dissolve and reform. This coagulation begins when boundaries are reclaimed. You are no longer the sum of what others needed from you. You are no longer the echo of your trauma. You are the living expression of a self that remembers its own sacred architecture. If you wish to master your mind, you must first master the shadow. And if you wish to master the shadow, you must first learn where you end, and the world begins. For the shadow thrives in boundarylessness. It hides in the places where you say yes when you mean no. It festers in the silence where a no should have stood. It whispers, "If they love you, you must not disturb them." But love that demands your silence is not love. It is consumption. The soul must learn to roar. And so I ask you now, not as a psychologist, but as a guide through the interior forest of the psyche. Where have you allowed others to draw their maps over your soul? Where have you surrendered your sovereignty in exchange for approval? Where have you betrayed your inner truth in the name of outer peace? These are not rhetorical questions, they are the gateways. The work begins not with answers, but with a willingness to ask. But you see, to set a boundary is not simply to say no. That would be too shallow an interpretation. To set a boundary is to say yes to your own soul, to declare a sacred perimeter around the psyche within which the self may grow in truth, unpolluted by the projections and chaos of others. In the alchemical metaphor, it is the vas hermeticum, the sealed vessel in which the transformation occurs. Without such a vessel, the prima materia cannot be held. The process of individuation is lost in dispersion. The soul evaporates without a vessel of the boundary. Without it, we are everywhere, and yet nowhere. You may wonder why life feels chaotic, why relationships feel draining, why a strange fatigue follows every social interaction like a shadow trailing behind you. It is because you are not protecting your psychic borders. You are allowing others to colonize your unconscious terrain, and in doing so, you forget who you are. When you allow the opinions, needs, and desires of others to consistently override your own inner voice, you fragment, and the self, which longs to unify all opposites, begins to wither in a scattered field of external validation. This is why I say when you finally set boundaries, everything falls into place, not because the world changes, but because your inner cosmos aligns like a constellation forming its pattern in the sky. Your soul finds coherence. When you reclaim the psychic space that belongs to you, the center returns, the axis mundi is re-established. And from this axis, your life can rotate with grace and precision rather than chaos and despair. Do not mistake boundary setting for aggression. It is not a barking of the ego, but the firm whisper of the soul. It is an act of love both for yourself and for others. For when you do not set boundaries, you make others. You are jailers and yourself their prisoner. But when you claim your own center, You release them from the burden of holding your wholeness, which was never their task to begin with. This is why so many relationships disintegrate after one person begins to individuate. It becomes clear how much of the bond was built on unconscious need and enmeshment rather than mature love. There is a dream I once interpreted. A woman found herself in a house with no walls, only windows. She could see out in every direction, but she had no privacy, no protection. Strangers peered in, commented on her movements, judged her actions. She felt exposed, vulnerably, anxious. And in the dream, she screamed, "Can I not have a room of my own?" You see, the house with no walls is the psyche without boundaries, and her cry was the soul's plea for sacred space. The dream ended when she began to build walls, not of concrete, but of light. She created a sanctuary where only those who resonated with her frequency could enter. And then she finally slept deeply, peacefully. This is what happens when you assert psychic sovereignty. You stop absorbing the chaos of others. You cease being the projective screen for their unintegrated shadow. You stop mistaking their pain as your responsibility, their approval as your purpose. You become an adult in the true spiritual sense, not one who is hardened, but one who is centered. And in that centering, everything begins to fall into place. Not because the world has obeyed you, but because your inner world now reflects order, not fragmentation. Some may say, but is not love the dissolution of boundaries? No, my friend, that is infatuation, that is fusion, that is the ancient hunger to return to the womb, to merge and dissolve and forget one separate self. True love requires two differentiated souls, each strong in their own boundaries, coming together not to devour one another, but to witness each other's essence. Love without boundaries becomes possession. It becomes dependency. It becomes the toxic fusion that leads to the loss of self and the rise of resentment. You must become whole before you can offer love that does not consume or demand. The one who loves from wholeness honors the boundary as a sacred right. I have seen many who come to analysis speaking of fatigue, of depression, of an inability to focus, and often the diagnosis is not some grand neurosis, but simply this: they are leaking energy everywhere. Their boundaries are portals. Their yes never means yes, and their no never means no. They are psychic sponges absorbing every vibration around them and calling it empathy. But empathy without boundary is self-destruction. To feel deeply is a gift only when it is paired with discernment. Otherwise, it becomes emotional codependency cloaked as compassion. So I ask you now, where in your life do you feel drained, and where do you feel vital? The answer will lead you to the places where your boundaries are either violated or respected. The shadow too plays its part here, for often it is a shadow that sabotages boundaries. The unloved child within says yes when it means no. The rejected archetype tries to please so as not to be abandoned again. The unacknowledged rage festers behind false smiles. And so the work of setting boundaries is not simply behavioral. It is archetypal alchemy. You must face the shadow that taught you. Your boundaries didn't matter. You must confront the inherited myths of your childhood that said, "If I assert myself, I will be unloved." You must uproot the ancestral voices that said, "To say no is to be cruel." Only then can you build walls, not of fear, but of sacred containment. There was once a man in therapy who could never say no to his mother. Though grown, he found himself enslaved to her needs, in dreams. She appeared as a serpent coiled around his feet, preventing him from walking. When he finally told her no, when he finally set the boundary, the serpent disappeared, and he dreamt of walking barefoot through a forest. Finally free, you see. That was not about his mother. It was about his inner feminine, his anima, who had been possessed by a tyrannical pattern, by confronting it in outer life. He liberated the archetype within. This is the mystery of boundaries. They do not only restructure the external world, They reshape your psychic map. When you finally set boundaries, you are not just rearranging your calendar. You are rewriting your myth. You are saying, I am no longer the sacrificial lamb. I am no longer the emotional sponge. I am no longer the hero who saves everyone at the cost of himself. You are choosing to become the sovereign of your own inner kingdom. And from that seat of sovereignty, all things begin to orbit in harmony. The chaos subsides, the inner voice quiet. The dreams become clearer, the fatigue lifts, and for the first time, your life feels like it belongs to you. This is not easy work. To set boundaries is to risk being disliked. It is to risk the crumbling of relationships that were built on your compliance. It is to risk being called selfish by those who only loved you when you abandoned yourself. But what is the alternative? To live in self-betrayal, to die a slow psychic death, while smiling on the outside? No. The soul will not tolerate it. It will erupt eventually through illness, through breakdown, through inexplicable despair. Thus, the boundary is not merely an act of defense. It is an act of creation. It is the line drawn in the sand where the true self begins. And once that line is drawn, once you yes and no align with your inner truth, the great mystery begins. Synchronicities increase, dreams shift, relationships reorganize, and you discover, perhaps for the first time, that everything truly begins to fall into place. And so you see, the unconscious does not respect the man or woman who has no inner wall. For the unconscious cannot distinguish between the sacred offering and the spilled chalice unless there is a vessel to contain it. Boundaries are the sacred vessel. They are the alchemical flask that allows transformation to take place without evaporation into chaos. Without boundaries, one is like a cracked crucible incapable of holding the heated metal of transformation. The prima materia leaks away, and so no gold is made. I have seen it countless times in patients. They confuse compassion with self-erasure, connection with enmeshment, love with sacrifice of the soul. This confusion births neurosis, which is not madness, but a refusal of the psyche to live in contradiction without resolution. The dream often comes to alert the patient to this. A recurring vision of being overwhelmed by waves, of a house without walls, of intruders breaking in uninvited. This is the psyche's cry for structure. One dream I recall. A woman came to me saying she dreamt of a sacred temple in the forest, glowing, ancient, but she could never enter it, because people kept flooding in and desecrating the place. They came laughing, pushing past her, tracking mud upon the floor, opening the sacred scrolls with careless hands. I told her, this temple is your inner life, and until you build a gate, until you set boundaries, no one will honor it, not even you. Boundaries are not merely psychological fences. They are initiatory thresholds. Each time you say no to what violates your spirit, you are drawing a magic circle, and within that circle, the alchemy begins. You do not become less loving by establishing it. You become more luminous. A clear boundary is not a mark of hardness, but of inner maturity. It is the line between chaos and cosmos. And only when you become the master of your psychic territory can the self reveal its architecture. Remember this, the boundary is not a wall against love. It is the frame in which love can be true. Without it, there is no I to meet the thou. There is only a fog of projections and unmet needs. This fog is the enemy of individuation, for it obscures your path and disguises the voice of the self as that of the crowd. And the crowd, yes, the collective loves nothing more than the one who bleeds for them without question, for he becomes their scapegoat. But the scapegoat is also the seed of the savior archetype. When he chooses to no longer carry the sins of others without consent, do not mistake this for selfishness. The man who has no boundaries is not generous. He is afraid, a fierce rejection, and so he becomes available to all. but in doing so he is unavailable to himself. The woman who never says no is not kind. She is conditioned, taught to equate worth with service. But I tell you, true service begins when your yes is rooted in truth, not compulsion, a boundary. Then is a sacred no that protects the sacred yes. Even Christ was due to the desert. Even the mystic hides away in the cave. Solitude is not escape. It is a necessary baptism before one can return to the world whole. You cannot love the world until you have claimed yourself apart from it. You must become the gatekeeper of your soul. The shadow will resist this whispering. You are abandoning them. You are cruel. You are unloving. But this is projection, your own fear cast in the voices of others. Look deeper. What are you truly afraid of? Often it is the void. The terrifying silence that comes when you stop being everything for everyone. But in that silence, you will hear something precious, your own voice, and then you will weep, for it has been waiting to be heard your entire life. In the alchemical text Aurora Consurgens, it is said that the vessel must be sealed with care, lest the spiritus mercurialis escape. This spirit, mercurial and elusive, is your life force. When you leak it through broken boundaries, you lose vitality. You age not from years, but from spiritual depletion. You become heavy with unspoken resentments, tired from endless compromises, sick in body, because the soul has not been honored. But when you seal the vessel, when you set boundaries, you begin to ferment. The inner wine becomes rich. The spirit returns. This is the miracle of containment. We live in an age where the outer world demands constant access messages, emails, obligations, but the psyche is not digital. It needs sacred pause, withdrawal, limitation. The introvert knows this instinctively, but even the extrovert must learn it without boundary. There is no center without a center. There is no self. You must reclaim your psychic center by defining its edges. You must dare to say, "This is where I end," and you begin. And this is holy. There is a patient who once told me he dreamt of a lion pacing the perimeter of his home. At first, he feared it, but in time, he saw this. The lion was his inner protector, his boundary made flesh. He had suppressed his assertiveness for years, fearing it would make him unlovable, but the psyche does not tolerate imbalance. What we repress becomes symbol, and the symbol always returns, demanding recognition. I told him, "Let the lion guard your inner sanctum. It does not devour, it defends." So too must you defend your inner temple, not with cruelty, but with clarity. You see, individuation is not just about discovering your uniqueness. It is about claiming responsibility for your energy. You cannot do that if you are porous. Boundaries give form to the formless. They allow the archetype to take shape in your life. Without them, the lover archetype becomes the martyr. The healer becomes the wounded. The teacher becomes the exploited. But with boundaries, these same forces become holy, integrated, empowered. And so I say to you, now set your boundary, not in anger, but in love. Do not scream it. Whisper it into your bones. Let it become part of your posture, your gaze, your breath. Let it shape your aura, your choices, your silences. You do not need to justify it. The self needs no permission to be sovereign. It only needs your allegiance. When you finally set boundaries, the soul exhales. The inner child stops screaming. The body unclenches, and life, with all its mystery, begins to fall into place. Not because it is perfect, but because you have returned to the center. And now, let us return to the realm of boundaries, not as walls, but as sacred membranes through which only what nourishes the soul may pass. The psyche, in its wisdom, often erects unconscious boundaries long before the ego becomes aware. The dream reveals them first. The recurring door you cannot shut. A stranger who enters your house uninvited. The room you never knew was there. These are not mere dream symbols. They are maps. They whisper. Here lies the place where your no was never spoken. To say no is to become aware of where you end and the world begins. To say no is to guard the inner sanctum in which the self lives. But how many of you have been taught that the noble soul must always be available, must always bend, must always be accommodating? That, my friends, is the breeding ground of neurosis. It is the disfigurement of individuation when one becomes a mirror to all but the stranger to oneself. You begin to perform the archetype of the helper, the healer, the martyr, without ever asking whether the soul consents. But when you set boundaries, you do not become less compassionate. You become more precise. You become a scalpel instead of a blunt instrument. You begin to wield your presence with intention. The friend who drains you, the parent who manipulates, the lover who crosses your inner lines when you say no to them. You are not breaking love. You are sanctifying it. You are saying, I will not allow this bond to become an arena for my diminishment. That is not cruelty. That is maturity. A woman once came to me in a dream analysis session, torn and ragged from years of serving a family that refused to see her. She had become their nurse, their savior, their mule. In her dreams, she was always carrying heavy suitcases up a hill, bags that never belonged to her. And when I asked her, what is inside these bags? She paused. Expectations. She said, everyone's but mine. Her healing did not begin with affirmations or rituals. It began the day she placed those bags down. It began the day she dared to ask, what would happen if I refused? That is the first act of psychic boundary setting, not in confrontation with others, but in confrontation with the inner tyrant that tells you it is your duty to carry what is not yours. That voice, that part of the shadow, must be named. It wears many masks. Guilt, shame, people-pleasing, false humility. But when you speak its name aloud, you bring it into the light. And only in the light can you choose whether to serve it or not. You see, boundaries are not about rejection. They are about reclamation. You are not pushing others away. You are pulling your soul back home. This is why everything falls into place. Not because the world rearranges itself magically, but because you begin to walk with the gravity of your true self. You speak less, but your words land deeper. You do less, but your actions ripple further. You are no longer scattered across the landscape of others' needs. You are gathered, centered, whole. And the irony, of course, is that once you live this way, the very relationships you feared losing begin to transform. Those who are drawn to your compliance may fall away. Yes, but those who are drawn to your essence will rise to meet you. They will respect your time. They will honor your truth. They will not mistake your softness for surrender. They will see the quiet fire in your eyes and understand that this is not a soul to be trespassed. You may wonder, how do I begin? Begin by watching your energy. Where does it leak? Where do you leave yourself behind? The soul knows it recoils when crossed. It contracts when dishonored. You feel it in your chest, in your gut, in your dreams. Start there. Honor the first contraction. Then, do not explain yourself. Simply protect the boundary with stillness. You owe no apology for being whole. And if you stumble, as you will, forgive yourself. You are learning to walk upright in a world that rewards bending. You are reclaiming a sovereignty that was never meant to be bartered. You are becoming a boundary, not a barrier, but a living threshold between the sacred and the profane. I have seen empires of the psyche collapse and rebuild upon this simple act, the reclaiming of the known, and from that, a deeper yes is born, a yes to peace, to clarity, to joy. You do not need to be everything to everyone. You need only to be true to the voice that lives within your depths. That voice is not selfish. It is sacred. And when you live from that place, everything, yes, everything falls into place. Not because the world changes, but because you are no longer betraying your soul to belong. You are no longer seeking peace through sacrifice. You have become a boundary, and a boundary, dear soul, is the birthplace of divine order. So let me tell you this in no uncertain terms. Your boundaries are not walls of isolation. They are the contours of your sacred shape. They are the architecture of your inner temple. And only those who approach with reverence should be allowed to enter. If someone must be taught how to treat you, then let them learn not through your endurance of pain, but through your quiet withdrawal of energy. That is the language of the soul. It does not scream. It simply exits. And it is then, in the aftermath of departure, that you begin to see the two alignments form. It is only once the false has fallen away that the true can approach. The ones who remain are not those who demand you to shrink, but those who rise with you, those who do not cross your lines because they have drawn their own. And you will find that the most spiritually mature souls are the ones who need no boundary explained. They sense it, they honor it because they have walked the same road you now walk. But beware the moment you set a boundary. Your shadow will awaken. The part of you that has gained its identity from being needed, being liked, being the peacemaker, it will fight for its survival. It will whisper, "You're being harsh." You lose them. This is not loving. But you must not take counsel from fear. Love without boundaries is not love. It is fusion. It is loss of self under the guise of virtue. Real love has form. It has direction. It has a spine. Even Christ overturned tables in the temple not because he lacked love, but because he loved what was sacred more than he feared discomfort. That, too, is a model of individuation. Love that protects, love that defines, love that says, "This shall not pass." And this is where your power lies. Not in how loudly you can speak, but in how peacefully you can remain unbending. Not as the tyrant who demands space, but as the elder who embodies presence. Let your no be so rooted in truth that it requires no defense. Let your yes be so pure that it echoes from the soul. This is not ease. This is the refinement of spirit through fire. And when you emerge, you will not be the same. You will walk differently with less urgency to explain, with less tolerance for the trivial, with less fear of disconnection, because you will have tasted the power of solitude, and you will know that being alone is not a wound. It is a womb. The womb of rebirth. The place where you remember who you were before the world told you what to be. And one day, you will look around at your life, your relationships, your home, your inner world, and you will realize nothing is missing, not because everything is perfect, but because everything that remains is true. That is the gift of boundaries. They are not punishment. They are precision. They are the scalpel that removes what is unworthy. So the soul may heal without infection. And in that healed space, the deeper self begins to speak. The voice that was once drowned out by obligation, by chaos, by chronic availability now. It is clear. Now, it is sacred. And it will tell you where to go, who to trust, when to rest, when to fight, when to release, when to receive. This, my friends, is when everything falls into place. Not because the stars suddenly align, but because you do. You stop running after peace. You become peace. You stop proving your worth. You become worthy in your being. And all things that are meant for you begin to rise, not because you reached for them, but because you made space for them. You stopped being the open field trampled by many and became the garden walled by wisdom, entered only through honor. There is no greater alignment than this when your outer world reflects your inner integrity, when your calendar reflects your soul's priorities, when your yes is a full-body yes and your no is silent thunder, when the people in your life no longer drain you because you have stopped confusing kindness with permission. And finally, in the stillness that follows, you will feel it. Peace. Not the kind that comes from avoidance, but the kind that arises from alignment. Not the peace of quiet chaos, but the peace of conscious choice. And in that stillness, you will hear something new, a whisper from the depths. It will say, "Welcome back. You've returned to the center. This is who you are beneath the pleasing, beneath the performing, beneath the pretending. This is the self. And this time, you did not find it through seeking. You found it through setting the gate."